right. So when I was walking around Chicago looking at all of the wonderful inspirations that the city provides, I did some sketches. And I decided that the perfect thing to do would be the great Chicago skyline. So you can see that this doesn't look like it took a lot of inspiration, but it did. I had to simplify my drawings. So once I simplified my drawings, I then took them and I flipped them so I could have something that I could trace onto my Fusible web. When you're transferring your drawing to the Fusible web, you want to make sure that you have an area where you can see through it nicely. I'm using a thin little ruler, and then you line it up, and then I like mechanical pencils, and then I'm just simply going to trace. Make sure you keep it straight. I've traced the skyline onto the Fusible web, and now I'm ready to iron it onto the black material. Word to the wise, make sure that you iron this paper side up. If you iron it rough side up, you will mess up your iron. So anyway, let's get this ironed onto our material. Now you will trace both a front piece and a back piece on your bag, so you want to make sure that you adhere both of those pieces. We're just going to cut our skyline out exactly on the line. So it's helpful if you have sharp scissors. Okay, so I've taken my therapy lesson and I've cut out all of the pieces. So here is what it looks like. Now this, as you can see, the paper's peeling a little bit easily. If you have some other kind of Fusible web that's not doing that, you can just take your pin and score the back piece, and that'll help you remove the Fusible web as well. Or the paper, not the Fusible web, the actual paper. So we're going to peel that off. Once again, for some of you, this can be therapy as well. And I'm throwing it on the ground, I'm sorry. All right, so now we're going to iron this onto the bag. And so I'm going to put this in place now. I want to show you something. This is these are a couple of buildings. The Sears Tower and the Hancock building, they have two antennae on top. We want to not stick those into place because we're going to do some satin stitching and we want it to be tucked under the building and here as well. So iron everything down except for those pieces, and you can iron those down later. The piece has been adhered to our backing material and I'm ready to sew. The machine has been set back to a zigzag stitch, but this time we have it as a satin stitch. That means that the stitch length has been set to 0.4 and the stitch width is at 4. And so that's going to give us a really tight, pretty stitch. So remember when we left these open? So now I'm going to add the antenna. Getting ready to sew the antenna, and I want to show you one thing. I've switched to the black thread instead of the gray thread that we had for our decorative stitches. And also I have tucked the stitching under the little flaps that were left from when we ironed the Fusible web. I'm not really much of a measurer, so this looks good enough to me, so I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to use the quick reverse button to go backwards so that my stitches don't come undone. Okay, that's good enough, so now I'm going to stop. I'm going to cut my thread, and then I'm going to do the other antenna. Now that we've sewn the antenna, it's time for us to stitch the satin stitching. So there's a couple things that you need to remember. One is that we're going to use a feature called needle down. This is going to allow for every time we stitch, the needle's going to land in the down position. That's going to be really important when we get to the corners and we do the pivoting. So let's stitch to the first time that we're going to pivot. Another thing that I want you to know is, notice when my needle is swinging to the right hand side, it's going just off of the edge of our black Skyline applique. Okay, I'm right at the intersection where I need to pivot, but I'm going to stitch further into the Skyline material about the distance of the width of the stitch, so 4 millimeters in. And then I'm going to stitch one more time so that the needle's on the left hand side, and then I'm lifting the presser foot and putting it down, and I've pivoted 90 degrees. So now for our convex piece, I have stitched all the way to the very edge, and now I have my needle to the right side, which is just off the edge, which will allow me for when I pivot in this direction 90 degrees for a perfect 90-degree angle. All right, I'm going to repeat this process again, pivoting 90 degrees. You might not feel comfortable with how fast the machine is sewing, so there is a motor speed button that allows you to turn down the peak speed of the machine. One side is the snail, the other side is the rabbit, and it's your choice how fast you want to go. I like to get the job done, so I like it to go fast, but you might want it to go a little bit slower. Alright, so here is the completed front side. We've got our antenna in there and everything's been tucked under nicely, so that's complete. And then don't forget to repeat on the back side. So now that we have the front and back of our bag, we're ready to move on to the next steps.